you're in the right place. This is the Eatfluencer Podcast, and I'm your host, Dr. Maggie Landes. Together, we are going to unpack everything about eating and discover the what, when, and how that will let you lead your best life. This is not your doctor's conversation about nutrition. Today is when you can start to love eating again. Let food be food and you be you. Get ready to get eatfluenced. All right, and welcome back to the Eatfluencer Podcast. I'm Maggie Landes. I'm your host here, and I'm so glad you've joined me today. This is going to be a good episode you do not want to miss, and I'm going to get into that in just a moment, but I have a quick announcement I want you to hear about an opportunity going on right now. If you're listening in real time, it's May 5th when this episode is being published. And just in case you don't make it all the way to the end of the broadcast, I want to make sure you know what's going on now. My Get Eatfluenced signature group coaching program is open for enrollment. This only happens a handful of times a year, and it's happening right now. We are starting next week. The group will start together for an 8-week experience where we really sort of unpack how we're stuck in diet culture, how we got here, and really I leave people exiting the program with actionable steps to change the way you think about food and get out of your own way so that all that emotional bandwidth and time that you're pouring into this micromanaging food obsession can be totally healed. So I want you to know if you're listening to this in real time, I don't like to put pressure on people, but really, truly, my program only opens a few times a year, and it will be another few months before I enroll again. The other little thing, at the risk of sounding real smarmy and markety, I'm going to increase my prices this summer. So if you're even like toying with the idea of like, well, maybe, or maybe I can do it later, do it now. Have this experience. I mean, honestly, who wants to save money, right? Everybody. So if you're going to do it now. And I want you to just go to the show notes and find out where everything is. It's basically on my website, Maggie Landes MD, and there'll be all the details. I have 3 different price points and 3 different levels of interaction, depending on how you learn and what you prefer to do. So anyway, that offer stands, and I will see you there. So let's get into this episode. This is episode 31, and we're calling it Kitchen Confidence the Non-Diet Way. And I have a guest today. You know that very few of my episodes are interviews, probably about a quarter to a third. So I shouldn't say very few, but less than half are interviews. So to me, this is extremely precious airtime when I bring a guest on here. And I'm pretty selective, to be honest, about who I will give the microphone to. But this person will not disappoint you. All right. So today I have Tori Martinet, who's a registered dietitian, who I met on Clubhouse. Yay for Clubhouse. Yeah, I can justify my Clubhouse use with anything, any number of things. But meeting Tori was well worth it. She comes from a background in dietetics, but has a super unique and interesting niche expertise. And she's in the culinary part of that world. She has an extensive background in the food and culinary industry, which I'll, get into in her bio, but, she's not a chef. For full transparency, she's not a culinary school graduate, but frankly, she's got enough experience in the industry. She probably could be, or should be, however I should say that. But the reason this conversation is important is because we have to deal with the food. We can talk till kingdom come about how we're going to change our minds and our thinking and realign our values and all these sorts of things. And that's all super important to do. But several times a day, every day, you are preparing food, ordering food, planning food, shopping for food, prepping food, eating food. You've got to deal with the food. So Tori's little corner of the universe is in that non-diet space, connecting people with the mindset and all the intuitive eating knowledge and all the things they know, and putting it into something to do in the kitchen with the food. Such a sticking point for so many people, and I'm so glad we are having this conversation for you so you can start to unravel some of that kitchen paralysis, we call it. Plus, by the way, Tori is just a magnetic, fun personality. I'm such a total foodie. I was just mesmerized the first time I talked to her and saw her Instagram where she went on like a taco tour of New York City. And I mean, this is the girl you want to hang out with, okay? She makes the food fun and real. So before we get to the interview, I'm going to give you her official bio so you know what her experience is. And then I hope you enjoy the interview. So Tori Martinet is an anti-diet registered dietitian, recipe developer, food writer, and cooking instructor with nearly a decade of experience in New York City's food industry. After serving as corporate director of wellness and sustainability to a premier food contractor in the Northeast, she started her enterprise, Tori's Table, a private practice centered on intuitive eating. Her work is geared towards helping people ditch the dieting cycle, improve their relationship with food, and gain kitchen confidence. That's what we're talking about today, as a side note, kitchen confidence. When she's not cooking or teaching, you will find her seeking out the best donut or burrito she can find. She's a proud aunt to her niece and nephew, and true to her nature as a native San Diegan, her happy place is at the beach. So Tori is a super cool human. I am so glad you're going to hear her speak. So let's get to her interview now. Well, hello, Tori. I'm so glad you're here today on the Eatfluencer podcast. And in full disclosure, I'm quite a bit of a fangirl because you are living basically my professional dream come true, where you are sort of marrying nutrition science and your background in dietetics with the culinary arts and frankly, just eating, which are, what I really wish I could do professionally. Maybe I can still get there, but if you will introduce yourself to everybody, I'm so glad you've been able to come today and we can chat a little bit. This is going to be fun.
Yeah. And thank you so much for having me. I've been looking forward to this ever since we connected on Clubhouse. I am also living my personal dream. So I think it's fun to be able to share it with other people. And I'm really happy to be here and talk on your podcast. So yeah, to give you a little bit of background about what I do, my name is Tori Martinet. I am a registered dietitian, specializing in culinary nutrition. I actually have a master's in nutrition and exercise science. I originally thought I was going to be working with athletes, and I do a bit. But mostly what I do is I teach people who are interested in leaving dieting behind. I teach them how to cook again. I teach them how to reclaim the kitchen space in a post-diet life. And it's really interesting because you see a lot of challenges that are unique that come up in the kitchen. You see a lot of, I think fear that comes up when people get in the kitchen. And I really just love to help people overcome that, build skills with the end goal being real, true autonomy around food choices. And that can only really be achieved through healing that food relationship. And that it can be achieved with learning some skills around how to manage food and how to do it in a way that really serves you best. So that's what I do.
Well, and it's such a kind of unicorn of a skill set that you have, because I've talked to lots of registered dietitians in the anti-diet space, and I actually have talked to a fair amount of culinary people, but they don't have the science background. And so to put those together is like, you have to do it, because we can talk about mindset and intuitive eating and stuff all day long, but the people still have to make food. You still have to grocery shop. You have to make food. You have to handle the food. You have to do something or order at a restaurant or whatever you're going to do with the food. And I really feel like that is the sticking point for a lot of people that I work with. They kind of, okay, I get it. Now what? So how has this whole diet culture, and my listeners are pretty familiar with what diet culture is, but where has that crippled us in the kitchen from your perspective?
Well, I think it's important to acknowledge, right, that I think and this was surprising to me when I first started doing this, was that a lot of people really felt like diets gave them a little bit of confidence in the kitchen. And I think
interesting
in the way that when you're following a super specific diet, you have structure to what goes on there. And so I think that they felt sort of guided in a way. Now, we also know about the really big challenges that come along with that and the detriments that come along with that. But then one of the things that I think intuitive eating doesn't necessarily give you, which is part of the point, right? But one of the things that it doesn't give you in the kitchen is a structure. And so, for me, what I really like to do is give people some really baseline cooking knowledge. I spent a lot of years in culinary. I used to serve as the director of wellness and sustainability for a very large food service company based out of New York. And I spent a lot of time with chefs. I'm a self-taught cook myself. I didn't go to culinary school. I have absolutely no real background in cooking in professional kitchens, but I've spent so much time there and I'm such a sponge for knowledge that I really just picked up so much information.
I'm giving you an honorary culinary degree too. I think you have earned it.
Some of my chefs would actually agree with you on that. But, what I really want to give people is just, here are 6 to 10 basic skills, how to really handle and care for a knife, how to really manage food safety in your kitchen, how to cook food so that it is the most satisfying and useful to you, right? So, really giving people direction in real time. I teach these live classes where, they're working hands-on in their kitchen and I'm teaching them, how to butcher meat. We're talking about how to safely handle vegetables. We're talking about how to bring umami to the vegetable family, right? So ways to really, in intuitive eating language, up the satisfaction factor on our foods.
Right.
Make all foods craveable, and then people can really go forward with skill sets to, cook their best meals, live their best life in the kitchen. And
right. Because I agree with you, the diets as restrictive and punishing as they are, for a lot of people, it's like a security blanket because they're being told, even if they're the ones cooking and they're preparing the food, and we're not eating prepackaged food, in a diet plan, but they know exactly what to do and exactly every step. And there's no creativity. There's no sort of poetic license or, for lack of a better word. And when you pull that rug out from under them and say, no more diets, then they're like, well, I don't know what to do.
Right.
If I even get home from the grocery store, I don't even know how to store the food, how to, like you said, just prep literally the food.
Yes. And also, I think as people learn this sort of non-diet way of making food choices, I think that's so helpful, but only to a point. If you don't have any skills for managing your food budget, or for what food, how long does food last? If you don't have those pieces of knowledge, you really can't get a lot further than you are. So, I try to give people a lot of those, each class I teach is if you remember nothing else from this class, if you only get one skill from me today, it's this thing. It's this one thing. It's finish your noodles in your sauce, because then they're going to taste like one thing together instead of two separate things. It's, you should have separate cutting boards for, meat, poultry, and veg. It's, I try to give people one bite-sized chunk, so to speak, of one thing that they can use to make a better decision for themselves.
And it doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be elaborate. That's the misnomer.
Right? You can go crazy, but most of the food I cook is not that serious, right?
I know. I will tell you, this is a little funny anecdote. My husband and I went to a cooking class a couple of years. This is before COVID. We got it as a gift, actually, from a wedding gift. And we went, it was at Sur La Table, right? And love. And somehow it was really, really super fun experience. But I got bamboozled in this cooking class into buying a $85 pair of spatchcock shears.
Oh my gosh.
So I am the owner of spatchcock shears, which I have. No, I have not used them. Of course not.
Spatchcock chicken is my favorite chicken.
Oh my word. Okay. Well, you're going to teach me how to do it, because I've got a very high-end pair of, but it just you get caught up in how fun it can be and how much possibility there is. And you look at it with curiosity instead of, so it's so many people. And a lot of my listeners are moms, are family people, are professionals. We're busy. We're not professional chefs. We don't have all day long to be spatchcocking everything we see. So, where do you start?
Everything in sight.
Right. Where do you start with this?
Well, so for people who are not going to take one of my courses, I think one of the best things you can do in terms of kind of building a skill set for yourself is this kind of the same thing you might do if you were eating in a restaurant, which is to say, what can I eat on a regular basis? Like, what types of foods do I like? What sorts of things do I feel good when I'm eating? You know, use those same sort of decision making questions that you would ask yourself with that same sort of like neutral non-diet mindset, and then apply that to foods that you can cook. Most people, and I don't know necessarily in a non-diet framework, but I think most people end up in sort of a comfort zone of like 20 foods, and that's it. That's what most people eat.
Yes.
And, you know, what I like to do is say, you know, everything that you eat should appeal to you. Everything that you eat should be, you know, a choice that makes sense for you, whether that's financial, whether that's time frame, whatever it is. But at the same time, you know, give yourself a little bit of room to explore new things as well. But where I really like people to start is figure out what you want to be eating through whatever criteria makes sense for you, and then keep 3 like non-recipe recipes in your back pocket. So
Yes.
for me, like what that typically is I really like, I'm a true millennial. I like to eat things out of a bowl. It's just the way we live our lives. And for me, I'm 99% of the time savory. I'm almost never interested in sweet things unless it's like ice cream at the end of the day, right? So for me, it's a savory, savory, savory. So breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
There's a reason I liked you so much.
Yeah, I'm all savory all the time.
Me
Anyway,
too.
so what I like to do is give myself the structure of, you know, 3 real types of things that I can eat all the time. So one is maybe a grain bowl option, one is a pasta option, and then, you know, one is maybe just like a protein veg combo, right? So you're getting, you know, sort of multiple food groups in one meal. You're getting something that will last over time because I usually cook for one. So for me, I'm all about like, how can I have something that I'll eat leftover? Or
Right.
especially if you're cooking for a large group, something that could maybe be customizable so that if, you know, you're one of your, either your partner or your child maybe doesn't like to eat a certain thing, they don't have to put it on their plate.
Right.
So for me, it's like, if I'm looking at the grain bowl option, I know I can take that, like, I'm from Southern California, so I can take that to a Mexican place. I can take that to a Mediterranean place. I'm also half Italian, so like I do a lot of that kind of flavor profile. But it
Right.
really ultimately is like a grain, a protein, a vegetable, and some kind of sauce. And then, you know, so like that gives you enough structure that, you know, I want to cook this thing, I want to pick a flavor profile, and then I can run with it.
Right. And what is available this week for your, you know, meal number A or whatever is gonna change. What do they have? What do you have access to? What did your next door neighbor just bring you tomatoes or
What
what,
was
you know?
on sale at the store this week, right?
Yeah.
Like, what were the things that looked good? Like, I like for people to choose produce or foods that excite them, right? If you're not about cauliflower, don't force it, right? I love to encourage people to eat new foods and try new things, maybe in a familiar way. But if it's not hitting for you, don't force it. Just move on to something you'll actually eat, right? Where
Right.
you waste money. I love there's all these memes about people that are like, you know, buying that head of lettuce that just sits and rots in your fridge. I don't buy lettuce. I don't eat lettuce. Like, I won't eat it. So I stopped buying it. And guess what? I don't waste that money anymore. So
Right. Yeah. And really being a little innovative with preparation. And I've learned this from my husband. I've always loved food and I'm not particularly picky. So I guess I never sort of understood that. I would classify him as sort of picky. But what I've come to find out is he'll say, I don't like, let's just say, he'll say, I don't, when we first got married, he didn't like asparagus. I don't like asparagus. Well, how have you had asparagus? Well, he's had canned asparagus.
yeah.
Well, no kidding. I don't like canned asparagus. If that was my experience with asparagus and I thought that was like the end of asparagus, I would say I also didn't like asparagus. But I'm like, well, have you had it this way? Have you had it wrapped in bacon? Have you had it broiled? Have you had it air fried? Have you had it grilled? You know, well, guess what? Guess who eats asparagus now? So we box in foods from one experience or one
We do.
preparation.
Yeah. And I think having ways that you know how to prepare things that you like as a starting point, then you can sub an ingredient here or there, or then you can take it to a slightly different flavor place. You know, for me, I really don't love seafood. But as a dietitian, I know that it brings a lot of great nutrients to the table. So one of the things that I'm going to be teaching soon is these salmon cakes that I make. It's one of the only ways that I will eat them. I really am not a big fan of salmon. It's not my thing. But if I give it enough kind of other flavors and I prepare it in a way that it's not like I'm not flaking a fillet, I don't get the same eating experience, and I actually really enjoy it. I don't have to force it. So
Right.
I think I know that I like, other things in patty form. So why not try it with salmon? So I really kind of went that route and it worked. So yeah, I mean, I think having that structure of these are 3 different types of meals that I can make, a grain bowl, a pasta, a whatever, whatever things make sense. And also really importantly, incorporating people's cultural foods.
Yes.
Super importantly, a big part of intuitive eating and not dieting is really getting back to some of those really beloved cultural foods for people. So, my father's side is French Cajun. So anything that's like a stew form is like very familiar and comfortable to me. Anything that's pasta form from my mom's side is like very familiar and comfortable to me. So like being able to eat those things, but know that I can put twists on them based on what I have on hand, what's in season, what makes financial sense at the grocery store. That's really how I approach cooking meals for myself. And one of the skills that I think is so important for people is like, just have a couple structured things in your back pocket and don't overcomplicate your life. Like it doesn't have to be crazy.
Right. Well, and people get very put off by this sort of cultural whitewashing of dietetics and nutrition, and I'm realizing more and more and more what a big problem that is. That it's, when we start putting everything in these categories, it's like, oh no, tortillas, you can't have tortillas. Oh, you can't have rice. Oh, you can't have noodles. You can't have, and it's like that. To expect that every person prefers to eat grilled chicken and broccoli is frankly just sort of negligent to even, and ignorant to just assume.
That's the word I would use.
Yeah. I mean, and I think when we're practicing, especially if you're a dietitian or a doctor or something, you're doing this to a patient. I mean, we have to be culturally aware. I think it's just wrong. And there's so many reasons why we as a culture have made, nutrition this way, but I love that you're opening that door again.
Yeah, and it's important because for all the reasons that you just mentioned, health doesn't have one definition and it doesn't have one look and one feel. And each person gets to decide for themselves, if they want to, what their own definition is. And it can include whatever foods you want. And for me, I spent, in my own experience of dieting, I spent a lot of years running away from the foods that I really love. And I just was like not happy measuring pasta. Shocker. And it's no way to live. There's no reason that you can't, enjoy foods that are, comforting to you, that feel like home, feel like parents and grandparents, that to deprive people of that cultural connection and that social connection just for the sake of dieting, to me is just really sad and unnecessary. So, I think the other side of that I see a lot is this, not just in health, but the cultural whitewashing of food in general. There's been a bit of chatter, and I'm hoping that there's more, but certain food bloggers that are calling out like, oh, this is an easy version of, a traditional Vietnamese dish, or this is an easier weeknight version of whatever dish this is. And it's like, okay, I understand what you're getting at, that you want this food to feel approachable, but why are we diluting it so that basically white people can feel comfortable? Like, why aren't we just saying how loud and proud and flavorful and wonderful this dish is? It's because people are afraid of food now.
Right. I like the exposure idea of it, but I think it's that maybe that's not the right execution of.
Yeah, the practice of it is way off. And there's a lot of not enough talk about it in food blogging, but as someone who writes recipes, I took this really interesting seminar on basically like cultural sensitivity in recipe writing. I don't have to you don't have to call a dish something other than what it is. Like you can, but if you're going to use the traditional name, it should be a traditional dish. You know, you can say it's inspired by, there's all kinds of different ways to really speak to what brought you to making this dish without being culturally insensitive. It's super not hard to do. I think a lot of people just aren't thinking about it. And I do think it's good to sort of bring that into the dialogue a little bit, because it really relates to this same idea that kale and quinoa is the only way to be healthy. I eat those foods. That's fine, but that's really not the only way to get there. So,
Right, exactly. So let's talk about this fear, because this is a major, major thing. And I don't know, you might be able to discern a little better than I have. What is the fear of the food? I mean, is it the fear of, I sort of see two things. I see people fearing that they're going to screw up their diet. You know, I'm doing air quotes. And so that's the first thing. And then I can usually get them past that. Okay, we do enough work where they're sort of like not so boxed in, but then they still have this fear of the actual food. Like they're going to screw it up or
yeah.
mess it up. And I don't know, I really can't put my finger on what that is. Cause see, I don't have a fear. I love food. I'm like, I've rarely made anything that I thought was, you know, a waste of my time. I mean, it's just, I just like eating anything, I guess. But where's that fear come from?
Well, I think some of it, there's different fears that come with food, right? There's these fears that, you know, certain types of foods will, you know, make us fat. So there's that inherent fat phobia that we experience around certain foods, that is worth unpacking. And I'm actually going to be teaching a class called Conquering Carbs. It's all about noodles and love it. Like we're just going to play with noodles, and we're going to take some of the fear out of the carb conversation. You know, that specifically is one that I come across a lot, but there is a major fear that the kitchen is this big, scary place where, you know, I mean, in real honesty, people can hurt themselves. That's real.
Yes.
But really, I think people are just afraid that it's not going to be good. And I think that is, I cook things and mess up all the time. All of the time. In fact, you know, one of my friends that ends up eating a lot of the food I make, I'm like, I hope you're comfortable with the fact that this is not going to be good all the time. There's going to be some failures in here. There's going to be some stuff that I burn because I have too many things going, or there's going to be, and I've been cooking for years. Like I'm a great cook and I still cook all the time. And, you know, but I think what it is that fear of the unknown that we experience, that fear of trying something new, and people don't know how to approach newness. So for me, if I'm going to try a new dish that I've never made before, I will Google and find 3 to 5 recipes for it. And I have a comfort level where I don't follow a recipe exactly. I will never. That's never going to happen.
Another reason I love you.
And unless it's baking, which I've learned that lesson.
Yeah.
A couple times this year. But, you know, I'll do something in between. I'll take an average of the 3 recipes and I'll know that I like this ingredient more. But people are afraid because they don't have a starting point, they don't have a structure, and they don't know how to taste their food. They don't know how to change flavor profiles.
Okay, right. Explain that. They don't know what, when they don't like it, they don't know
how to change it.
It needs salt, it needs acid, it needs fat. They don't know that. Is that what you're
talking about? One of the things that we learn in class that I think people resonates with people a lot is how to taste your food. We taste at multiple points in each dish. You're going to taste just pasta water. Just water and salt. You need to taste how salty it should be, right? So things that chefs know to do, culinarians know to do, but that at home you would never think to do it. Like if I'm making meatballs, I want to taste the seasoning. You obviously can't eat raw meat. Well, cook a tiny piece of it before it's done and formed into meatballs. Like cook off a tiny piece and see where your seasoning stands. But I think people skip that step and they end up with food that doesn't taste great. And I think also people are really afraid of certain ingredients. Like people under season constantly. It's wild to watch how like timid people are. I'm like shaking, you know, the paprika in or whatever it is. I'm very free.
I pop off, you know, they have the little plastic little holes. I take those off. So I'm like more like a dumping sort of.
Absolutely. And I like to have an idea for how much is going in there, especially because I do write recipes. In fact, I spent a lot of years writing recipes, very, very specific recipes, but I will kind of pour it into my hand and then pour the seasoning in, you know, just whatever it is. Like it's good to have a general idea, but people are afraid to season. People are afraid to they don't think to taste. And then when they do taste something and it tastes off, like, oh, this needs something, that's a learned skill. No one's necessarily, I think, born knowing how to do that, how to change the flavor of a food as you go, or how to alter texture, how to change the composition of something.
Right.
One of the dishes I have taught in the past is probably the best recipe I've ever written. And it's for this chicken tortilla soup. It sounds simple. It sounds like, oh, it's just soup, but like, it's honestly one of the best things I've ever made. It's one of the most requested recipes from people that have tasted it. And it's just super fun and easy to make. But it's, if you have no like ability to taste and change the composition, it won't land where you need it to land. So It's one of those ones that I use a lot for teaching people how to taste, because there's a lot of different competing flavors in it, and it teaches them where to find the balance. So, for example,
it's like a training soup.
It is a training soup. So if you're tasting all the flavors you need to taste, but you're not getting enough volume from them, if they're not loud enough to your palate, you need salt. If you are tasting, too much roundness, if it tastes too fatty, or if it's tasting too round, you need more acid. Things like that. So we talk a little bit about you give language to flavor in this class. Like in my courses, we learn how to name flavors. Earthy is one of my favorite flavors to describe, or one of my favorite words to use to describe flavor. Vegetal, we talk about like all these different words, because I think people don't have language to use to describe it. And then we talk about how to really like shift it to where you want it to be. And their soup doesn't have to taste like mine. It needs to taste like what they want. It needs to taste like what makes sense for them. So, and I'm not with them. I have no idea what it tastes like. This is all virtual. So, we end up getting there, but it is a really fun one to be able to teach people how to pursue a balance of flavor in food. But it's different. It's hard.
Yeah, I think you really touched on that. That language is so important. And I mean, I'm a pediatrician, and so I think a lot of stuff in terms of families and children. And when I'm talking to people about the actual cooking part, and they're all, because this is every mom's like, their kids don't like anything. I don't like this. I don't like this. And you're just like, okay, and a 4, 5, 10-year-old, even teenager doesn't have the language to tell you what is it they don't like. I just don't like it. That's the answer. I just don't like it. But I give to my clients a vocabulary list that's like, is it crunchy, spongy, leaky, sticky, chewy, salty, and then you figure out what's the problem. Then, then it basically the solution becomes evident. It's like, okay, well, this was too sticky, then maybe we need to bake it longer and it won't be sticky anymore or whatever. But that's empowering.
Yeah. And I've never thought about giving a vocab list, but that's a really interesting idea. I've done that I have a 5-year-old niece. She's a pretty open eater, but she definitely has some preferences. And we talk about it.
Which is developmentally normal at that age, by the way.
Absolutely. But, if she doesn't like something, we'll ask her why. And I've taught her to describe textures, and we've talked about how to describe flavors. And we talk about, she knows Aunt Tori cooks in the kitchen all the time, and she knows that, all these things. And she's actually really into watching Bon Appetit test kitchen videos right now. She really likes Claire Saffitz, and which I think is great, because we are a group of neurotic women for sure. But it's really cool to see her have language to describe these things, because a lot of adults, the people that I'm teaching, really don't. And I think that's a huge part of it. And I think it also relates the same idea to this element of incorporating health supportive nutrition in a non-diet way. I think that language is the connector there, because when I also, as a part of these courses I teach, really want to give people language around how to talk about when they're ready, how to bring in adding nutrients into their diet. And, we were talking earlier pre-recording about this trip to New York that I took, and all the many, many eating things that I did while I was there. And at the end of it, you know, in a diet mindset, I might have described it as like, oh, I feel terrible. And I wasn't feeling my best at the end of the trip. And I need to eat quotation fingers clean. Well, I no longer feel the need to say that. What I need is to like really evaluate how much salt I'm eating, because I'm feeling like really, really bloated, right? At the end of eating noodles and bagels and pastries. And then also, I could probably use some fiber. I could probably use some vegetables in my life. And to be able to put like actual scientifically appropriate, nutrient appropriate, neutral language to what the needs are, to what
Right.
the nutrients are that you do want to incorporate, it takes a lot of that morality out of eating foods that may be seen as healthy.
Right.
And I think having that language on both sides, whether it's to describe flavor and texture and what you do and don't like, also to be able to have language around, what things you do want from your food that are going to support your health. I think that all really fits together.
Right. And the physical body, I mean, describing
Yeah.
you're doing now, that's where I think so many dietitians just miss an opportunity because they assume that that's the first step, and somebody's not ready for that. When they're buried in diet culture, the idea of adding fiber is not about, my stomach is kind of bloated, I feel like I need to have a bowel movement. It's more like, how many grams, how much do I weigh, how much does this, how much, and this neurotic sort of frenzy, which gets us nowhere.
Yeah. And I think a lot of the time when people come to me, they are sort of at a place where they've hit a point where they're out of that frenzy. I don't typically think my courses are appropriate for people who are still really needing a lot of that one-on-one support, who are still sort of in the throes.
Yeah.
That deserves its own time and its own energy and its own space. And I think for people who are sort of, I don't know, maybe graduating is not the right word, but feeling like they have a bit more independence and a bit more coping skills for how to handle these things, through work with people like yourself. I think when they're sort of hitting that point where they're like, okay, I have a handle on this, but what's next? That's when they come to me.
Yes, because then they have to deal with the food. Like we said at the beginning, you've got to eventually deal with the food.
Yes, but eventually, it's not the first thing you should be doing, right? In fact, food is the last thing you should really be thinking that hard about when you're starting this whole like non-diet process, right? It's not something that you want to devote that much time and energy to. But when you've hit a point where you're feeling a lot more neutral about these things, and really feeling like you're incorporating these principles into your life, but you still sort of need to tackle the food element, that's really where I come in.
Yes. Oh, well, I know a lot of people I'm going to send your way. So, in the interest of sort of wrapping this up a little bit, and I will have to do this again because I could talk to you all day. You're speaking many of my languages, including noodles and tacos and all the things. What if we were going to like have the listeners walk away with a couple of like actionable things? Okay, like they listen to the podcast. Now what? What can they do this week? What can they do today?
Yeah, I think the number one thing that people can do is just what we were talking about, which is give yourself, time and permission to write down 3 different like skeleton meals that you like. 3 meals that make sense for you, that you enjoy, that maybe fit your family structure. Sit there and write them. Like, I really like eating pasta. Love it. Can't get enough of it. Well, under the pasta column, give yourself 3 different pasta options. There's a million different types of noodles out there, or is there a way you can take that noodle framework and take it in a different direction altogether? It doesn't always have to be Italian.
Right.
I think the number one thing is people giving themselves permission to eat food that they like, giving themselves, structure to really like try that same thing that works for them, that they know will get eaten, that they know they love, and do it in a couple different ways. Like, give yourself, maybe 3 of them. And then from those 3, give yourself 3 different ways to approach it. And just get out there and Google some things. Like, get out, there's a million food blogs on the internet. And some of them are very diety, and I stay far away from them.
Right.
But, there are some really great recipes out there that, like, if you know you love a noodle, go Google some noodles and get yourself some variety, but stick with what you like and actually what will work for you.
Right.
You know, and see if there aren't ways that you can, you know, work within this structure, but to get yourself to a place where, you know, you're getting a little more variety.
Yeah, I like the idea of having three, like you said, skeletonized or sort of core meals, and then you have variations on a theme. I mean, the rule of three is good. The rule of three works for photography. It works for journalism. It's just a good, threes are good. We like threes. So
it's an odd number.
Yeah, but then once you start being creative within those sort of skeleton framework, you have a lot of options.
Yeah, if salad is your thing, you can do a romaine salad, you can do a blue cheese wedge, you can do a kale salad, you can do, there's a lot of different variety, but coming at it from a place of enjoyment and interest, I think is a really good starting point. And that gives you, you know, I think it's overwhelming when people look at an empty fridge or a fridge with just a few things in it. But if you have in your mind the three things that I know I can make and that I like are salad, pasta, and grain bowl, I can start to look to put those pieces together. And that's really how you start to conceptualize, you know, running a kitchen.
Right, right. Because we want you to be in power in the kitchen. The kitchen does not own you. You own your kitchen.
The kitchen is there to serve you in whatever purpose you need it to. The kitchen is there for people to walk in, own the place, and walk out with something that's tasty and that meets their needs. And you know, you can identify different needs on different days. You can, but I think it's daunting, and giving yourself a little bit of structure in a non-diet mindset goes a long way to taking some of that anxiety out.
Yes, that is huge. I know that is going to be hugely helpful, because the total blank slate that some people perceive this intuitive eating, like anti-diet thing, is just like a total free for all, one big giant blank sheet of paper, is too much. That's too overwhelming, you know, and
I get that.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, it's hard, but I think learning how to give yourself that structure in a way that is actually supportive and not restrictive, you know, learning how to navigate that space is super, super useful in life.
So important. So here's the deal. Tell my listeners, they're going to want to hear more. So where can they find you? Where do you hang out at? What are you doing now these days?
So these days, I've been taking a bit of a hiatus, but I'm usually pretty active on Instagram over at Tori's Table. They can also find out more about what's going on. I'm going to be putting out a newsletter for the first time starting this month. And you can subscribe to that on my website. And you can also check out my recipes on my website on toristable.com. Those are really like the two main places that you're going to see content from me. And if anyone's interested in taking my classes or just learning more about what I do, or, you know, even if you want to do one-on-one stuff, I do teach individual lessons. DMing me or sending me an email through their website is the easiest.
Okay, cool. And I will put all those links in the show notes so that they can click to your website, click to your Instagram, and on Clubhouse now, because you know that's where I found you, on Clubhouse.
Yes, we met on Clubhouse.
My listeners are aware of my Clubhouse addiction, which I'm trying to curb a little bit, but
yeah, I do love Clubhouse. I'm not going to lie. I haven't been on it as much, but I do really enjoy it.
Well, you know, and it's given me just, this is not an advertisement for Clubhouse, but there are people like yourself probably that I would have not happened to run into in any other venue. And like how much we have in common and how much I have to learn from you is just like, that's worth the price of admission, honestly. So,
and connecting with like-minded professionals is really hard right now. And, you know, without the conference circuit that I would usually be on, without, you know, it's really social media, and you feel kind of weird, like sliding into people's DMs. And so Clubhouse is a really like wonderful way to sort of like get a sample of people's, you know, where they stand professionally on certain issues and where they, you know, how they practice and what they do. And then to be able to connect with them with some background.
Right. And Yes. And I've said many, many, many times, this anti-diet mission is what I look at it as. I mean, this is more than just like a job. It's gonna take all the players, so it's going to take the people from the clinical side. It's going to take the policymakers. It's going to take the fitness people. It's also going to take the culinarians. And I'm so happy to know that, there's people like you who really have that comfort level with food and still can support all of these things.
Yeah. And I would love to be in a position that other health professionals that are really on this same mission with us feel comfortable, sending people my way if they feel it's appropriate. I think one of the best things that I have is a great referral network. And I think, feeling like I have, other health professionals or other dietitians, like I will say, like, a lot of dietitians can't cook, or they're not
Oh yeah.
good at it, or they can't teach it.
Or they're so far in diet culture, they, themselves, right?
Yeah. And I think for so many intuitive eating dietitians that I know, non-diet dietitians, like, food's just not their thing. Guess what? It's my thing. It doesn't have to be yours. This is the beauty of having different practice areas. And, I'm pleased to be, a part of that network for people. And it's been lovely to have met and connected with you.
Yes. And the virtual teaching is what you do. So people do not have to be physically located where you are. They can, all your stuff is.
Don't come to Indiana.
Don't come to Indiana.
Where I'm at. No, I teach typically on Eastern Standard Time, but I am thinking about offering some that are more accessible timeframes for the West Coast, because I'm from California. I'm a California girl. So, just reach out if you have questions, or if you want to see something. I'm very open to people's feedback at this point in the game, but I'm just really having fun teaching people how to cook when, there's no rules around it.
Yes. Well, thank you again for coming today. This has been such a great conversation, and you are just a light in the profession. I'm happy to have connected with you.
Well, back at you. And thank you so much for the opportunity to be here and talk to all your wonderful listeners.
You're welcome. Was that not everything I promised? She is just a gem. So I want to just let you know, please look her up in the show notes. She's at toristable.com, and see what she's up to. If you want to revive your love of food and cooking, and of course eating, she's your go-to woman. So please look her up. And one last plug also, my Get Eat Fluent Signature Group program, as I mentioned at the beginning, starts next week. This is it. 2 more days of registration. If you're interested in learning real, actionable ways to get out of diet culture and transform your life, please consider this. You can stop all that crazy, neurotic point counting, weighing, measuring, just total brain fog of micromanaging your eating. We can learn about food, we can learn about the body, and we can get over this. So please take a look at that. It starts next week. It's all in the show notes or at my website, maggielandesmd.com. So thanks again for listening this week, and until next time, thank you so much for being here today. If you love what you've learned, follow me on social media at Maggie Landes MD, and you'll never miss a thing. You can also check out my website at maggielandesmd.com and sign up to be part of our community of eaters. Thanks again for stopping by. We'll talk again soon.